I'm a government employee. My name isn't important, and all you really need to worry about is what I have to say. I work at a compound known as the facility. Within it, we perform research on things that the public would find unappetizing. Officially, we're listed under the experimental weapons development, but lately our umbrella has spread much wider. Suffice it to say that there are things out there that go bump in the night. Things both legendary and mundane, that exert their influence upon us and defy explanation. My job is to interview the individuals who believe they've encountered such entities and determine the validity of their experiences. This is one such interview. The room is cramped, dimly lit. It smells vaguely of stale piss and black mold. A light hangs above the table between us, rocking back and forth and doing a poor job illuminating much of anything. Still, I can see the man's face and the fields on my clipboard. It's enough. It'll do. I ask the man to tell me a story and it begins. It happened when I visited her cabin, the man says. He's 29 with a long nose and a 5 o'clock shadow. When he reaches for a cigarette, his hand shakes. Not my cabin. It belonged to her, but she invited 3 of us up. To get away from it all, I make a note on my clipboard. 4 individuals. He nods, taking a heavy drag off the smoke. Yeah, something like that. Get drunk, get stoned, forget about life for a while. He swallows, and his eyes dart to the cameras in the corner of the room. He scratches his cheek anxiously. It's a look I've seen before. It's better if you tell me everything, I say, placing my clipboard on the desk in between us. Strictly speaking, I'm not law enforcement. I'm not here to have you arrested. Sure, he says. Another long drag. He taps his finger on the desk. We're doing mushrooms, too, at least. Steven and I were. That's fine. I check a box on my clipboard labeled intoxicated. Tell me about the event. It happened late at night. The 4 had been drinking in the cabin, but we all slept outside in tents. You know, less spiders to deal with. The cabin wasn't exactly lived in year-round, so a lot of bugs would make their homes in it over the winter and spring. Just to confirm, you used the mushrooms while drinking? I steady my pencil on the form. On the box beside intoxicated, they read, disqualified. That's a combination inviting hallucinations. Look, it wasn't a hallucination, all right. The man seethes for a moment, clenches his hand to a fist while his lips make a thin line. Then he takes a breath and regains his composure. Sorry, he says. Thinking about that night puts me on edge. Understandable, I say. Such reactions are to be expected after witnessing an event. Now then, if you wouldn't mind clarifying my earlier question, did you consume mushrooms while drinking? His head shakes. No, the mushrooms happened several hours earlier. They weren't even a factor when... He trails off, his eyes gazing at the ashtray on the table between us. There's an emptiness to them, a sort of disconnect. I wonder if he's thinking of the legend I suspect he's encountered. I wonder if he's thinking of Jagged Janus. I cleared my throat. They weren't a factor when the event occurred? Yeah, they'd worn off by then. You're positive? He gives me a look of disbelief. No, I'm fucking lying to you for the fun of it. Yes, I'm positive. Aggressive behavior, I remind him, will not be tolerated. He opens his mouth and the words hang there for a moment. I've done enough of these interviews to know that there's more he wants to say, or maybe yell. He doesn't, though. Instead, he takes another breath, leans back in his chair, and apologizes. Look, he says, I know what I'm going to tell you is going to make me sound crazy or high or whatever the fuck else. I promise you, though, that it happened, and that seeing as you're one of the ones who came to me for this interview, the least you could do is listen. I nod. Of course, entirely reasonable. I circle the word irate on my form. What are you writing? The man asks, leaning forward. His eyes narrow at my clipboard as I pull it away. Why won't you show me? It's against protocol. Knowledge of my notes could influence your account. I prefer it if such biases were avoided. Now, please continue. He licked his lips. They're chapped and cracked. Fine, he says. Like I said, we were drinking in the cabin, swapping old stories from high school, talking about the stupid pranks we used to pull, or places we'd all hang out, or shitty teachers we hated, we reminisced. His finger taps the table. Pretty soon we get really drunk. The sort of drunk where you stop goofing off and things go deeper. We start talking about our hopes and dreams, about our past and our futures. The kind of shit that sets your soul on fire. That's very poetic, I say. Are you a writer? Sometimes. As such, would you describe yourself as having an active imagination? He sighs and shakes his head. I like to describe myself as in the middle of speaking thanks. I press my pencil to the clipboard, undetermined. So we're all drinking, he continues. And Emily gets this really low all of a sudden, like mood-wise. She seems down. Emily being the woman who inherited the cabin. He nods. We asked her what's up, and not to be pushy or anything, but just as friends, I mean, fuck, we've known each other for over 10 years at this point. We care about each other. What does she tell you? He looks down. There's this melancholy in his expression. She tells us why she never invited us out there before. I scratch a note on the form, straightening up in my chair. That reason being, her brother died there when they were kids. He drowned to death in the ocean. I frown. It doesn't match the legend. Anything else? He glares at me. Are you serious? Anything else? Yeah, that's it, asshole. Her brother died in the place and it reminds her of him. A sad story, but not why we're here. I check a box labeled confrontational. Please continue. He takes a few minutes to think about it. His jaws clenched and his eyes are boring into me. Eventually he takes another drag, breathes out a plume of smoke, and speaks. Like I said, we're drinking, talking, like all good things, it comes to an end. Emily stops first. She decides she's ready to head to bed and that she's had enough to drink, so she heads back to her tent. That leaves me, Steven, and Haley. Haley's passed out on the couch, and Steven and I chat for a couple more hours, but eventually we both decide it's time to get some shut-eye too. I nod. So far nothing mentioned warrants the facility's involvement, but I'm keeping an open mind. The police report sounded like Janice, after all. According to the police report, I say, rolling my pencil in my fingers. The cabin is where the event occurred. Can you describe it for me? The layout? Sure. He scratches the back of his head and furrows his brow. His pupils dilate in focus as though he's recalling a memory. It's sort of a T-shaped, capital T. It's got 2 bedrooms on either side of the T, and with the bathroom at the top center. And then there's a living area in the front of the bathroom, and finally at the bottom of the T is like the kitchen, the front door. You said the event occurred in the washroom, correct? He takes another drag on his cigarette, burning it down to the filter. His eyes are bloodshot. You got any more of these? He asks. I reach inside my jacket and pull out a pack, then toss it to him. He eagerly flips it open and slips the smoke out and lights it. So, the 4 of you get into your tents. What happens next? He shrugs. I read my book. Your book? Yeah, Miss Twarn. Ever read it? I shake my head. I don't care for fantasy. What happens after you read your book? Nature calls. Gotta take a shit, so I get up and I head to the cabin. It's pitch black outside when I unzip my tent. Can't even see my feet on the ground. Pitch black, or had your eyes simply not yet adjusted? Pitch black, he says flatly. The cabin's on a tiny island off the coast of British Columbia. The only light it gets is the moon, maybe the stars. That night it was overcast, so the moonlight came and went with the clouds. You carried a flashlight then? He shakes his head. No, just my phone. I use its light to make its way back to the cabin. Once I get inside, I shut the door behind me and I get a weird feeling. Can you describe the feeling? Like I'm being watched. Promising. Continue. The place feels empty, lonely. It's just me, the spiders, and my phone. He pauses. The light's making shadows out of everything. The dusty fridge, the messy shelves, the cluttered counters. There's thousands of shape all around me, shifting as if I'm walking, and this feeling of, I don't know, dread comes over me. Like I'm not safe. He clears his throat. But I'm drunk enough that the feeling doesn't do much to faze me. I shake it off, I laugh a little. I mean, I came to take a shit, and some spooky shadows aren't gonna stop me, right? I guess they call it liquid courage for a reason. He laughs at his own joke. A few seconds later, though, I'm in the bathroom, locking the door behind me. His leg's bouncing under the table, and it's shaking the top of it. Would you like a glass of water? I ask, pouring him a cup. I recognize the anxious body language and the insistent licking of his lips. I've seen it before. He waves his hand dismissively. I'm alright, he says, but he reaches across, takes a sip anyways. So I'm about to unbuckle and do my business, and I see movement. It's in the top corner of the bathroom, and one of those little toilet windows, like the type that's got, a cloud of stuff on the bottom for privacy, but clear on the top to let light in. I've seen those, I say, nodding. I have one in my bathroom. Is that where the event occurred? He nods, running his hand through his dark hair. That's where I saw the smile. Jagged Janice. Describe it, please. He shakes his head. I'd rather not. Can we just discuss the event? The smile is a part of the event, I remind him. It's important that we get as many details as possible, no matter how uncomfortable those memories may be. He looks down and his eyes drift out of focus. He's remembering it. The smile. It was a row of teeth, except the teeth were too big and too sharp to belong to a human. And there were just so many of them. I looked down at my notes. I read over the description of Jagged Janice, and as mentioned in old email chains from the earlier 2000s. I'd like to hear more about her teeth. He bites his lip. Her teeth? Why? The teeth are important. Describe them, please. He's uncomfortable. His voice cracks and his chest sighs, but he gives me what I want. The teeth were jagged, serrated almost. Their length was all over the place. Some barely broke her gums, others stretched down, piercing her bottom lip. His fingers moved again. They're tapping the metal table. When I see the smile, my heart starts pounding. I'm just frozen there, standing in the dark bathroom, with just the light from my phone. My mind's reeling, but I know whoever that smile belongs to, I don't want them seeing me, so I hold my phone to my chest and extinguish the light. Did the woman showcase an adverse reaction to light? Janice, according to her legend, loathed light. No. Or, I don't know, maybe? I can't remember small details. He's sweating now, his eyes transfixed on the cigarette burning low between his fingers. At that point, my body's just mostly like adrenaline. I feel a storm of it coursing through me and screaming at me to run or to fight this bitch or do something, anything. But I can't. I just stand there staring at her inhumane teeth, at her horrible, twisted smile with my phone clutched to my chest like a Christian cross. Then the smile starts to fall away, lowering itself until it's obscured by the foggy part of the glass. In its place are two eyes. He takes a breath. They're wide, angled all wrong, and leaking black fluid. They dart around the washroom as if looking for something or somebody. I stay still, paralyzed. There's no light, save the moon framing the monster in the window, so I meld into the darkness and pray to fucking God that the creature can't see me there. I feel dribbles of piss run down my leg. I'm panicking now completely, and I'm losing control of my body. He shivers, taking another long, slow drag on a cigarette. That's when I hear the tapping on the window. It's followed by this chattering sound, and then I realize it's her teeth gnashing together, open and shut over and over again. I don't want to look at her, but part of me can't stop myself. I glance up to the window and I see her eyes staring back at me, these two tiny black dots in a sea of white. My breathing stops, my pulse races, and it's just the two of us now, watching one another. I lean forward, interested. Much of that description could have been pulled from the jagged Janus legend itself. The tiny black pupils, rows of inhumane teeth, the gnashing jaws. I check off the features on my clipboard as we go. What happens then? I ask. Then she speaks. It's only 3 words, but it's enough to turn my dribble of piss into a torrent. He swallows, his eyes wide as he recites the words. I see you. I write them down and circle the words 3 times. They're not familiar to me. Did she sound young or old? Describe her voice. He shakes his head, shuddering. The voice was quiet, hard to hear. Those words sound like they've been pulled out of a wood chipper. The pronunciation was broken and unnatural, like they've been cut up by those teeth. Curious, I mutter. Continue? Her fingers reach up and she taps on the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. I chance another look and all I can see is that terrible, serrated smile. I look away, but I know I need to watch her. I have to monitor her because who the fuck knows what this creature's gonna try to do. So I look back up, but the smile's gone, and so is the woman. It's just me. He puts his face in his hands and his shoulders quake with silent sobs. A minute passes. It appears we've reached the end of his account. A harrowing experience, I say, giving my notes a final swipe with the pencil. I straighten up in my chair, flattening the front of my jacket and reaching out to shake his hand. On behalf of the facility, I'd like to thank you for taking time to share it with us. His sobs taper off and he's quiet for a moment. Then he looks up from his hands. His eyes are red and his voice is shaking. It's not over, he says. There's more. I pull back my handshake. My apologies. Something else occurred? Yes, he says. The next few hours turn into a nightmare.